I'm leading this one. Brace yourselves. We're going to dive into subverting the X race is evil trope. And talking around it, we briefly, very briefly, just before this started recording, touched on the subject of, subverting the X race is evil trope and how that can segue very quickly into what is evil. And then, is somebody actually evil, even if they're designated evil? I started with Dr. Freeze, who is attempting or is committing crime in order to try and save their wife. Is that evil?
From a certain point of view, because unfortunately a lot of this conversation is going to be from a certain point of view. I tend, when I'm thinking in world building and adventure building senses, is this person evil? Well, are they more selfish than selfless? So, the Elven King that goes, the problems of lesser races are not our problem. Is he being evil at that point? Well, technically, yes, because he's saying this bunch of people, they can go jump.
Yeah.
I'm going to
Cross
fall.
counter?
I'm going to fall on the. No, it's not even a cross counter. I'm going to fall on a fairly standard argument, one which has been brought up a few times, which is lawful good can be the most evil alignment.
Yes.
It is a fairly common meme, which fundamentally stands by the idea that if you are a lawful good anything, but it tends to be levelled against paladins quite a lot. If you are a lawful good in a nation which is fundamentally brutal, it is a regime. It oppresses its people with strict, and this is the important things, laws. As a lawful good person, you must follow and obey those laws, regardless of how strict and overbearing and how tyrannical they may be, because you fundamentally believe that the laws will aid and benefit the people. It is a good act, it is the good thing to maintain the status quo. It is a good thing to maintain the government as it stands. That is your fundamental belief, and it will allow you to do things like execute poverty-stricken peasants if you're ordered to.
That's heavy on the lawful.
Yeah.
I don't see any good in that.
No, but
Question is social good versus individual good. Is that where the selfish and selfless line comes in?
This is it. This is when it comes down to your point of view. I mean, let's pick up the D&D Monster Manual and look at kobolds. They're lawful evil in the Monster Manual. What are they doing? 99% of the time, they're defending their home.
Mm-hmm.
And they're looking after their people.
Yep.
And they're building traps to stop big, clumpy people nicking their stuff.
Which they may or may not have that may not be theirs.
Yeah.
But yes.
And following on the Monster Manual thing, just because the Monster Manual says a thing, I tend to take that because Wizards have certainly written the more recent books as if they're written by an in-universe person.
Mm-hmm.
But what if that in-universe person is either A, racist, or B, has only encountered this race in several rarefied situations? And that's their only view on kobolds or orcs or drow, who are the normal book says these are evil.
Yep.
Trigger warning here.
Yeah.
Because we've just as we're inching into potential real comparisons.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But unfortunately, that is kind of where this goes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one thing I again try to put in when I'm world building is just because book says they're evil doesn't mean they're evil, but also doesn't mean they're not assholes. There's no.
Osholry and its relationship to evil. Is it axial? Yeah.
One thing I like to go through is, so we've got orcs in D&D. They're all bloodthirsty, ruthless raiders, according to the person who's written the book. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why are they bloodthirsty, ruthless raiders? Were they perhaps, say, many generations ago, nomadic herd people? We have our herds of goats and we travel from pasture to pasture. But then some good-coded, white-coded races started building cities.
Yeah.
Colonialism. Yep.
And they chased us off our land. It got to the point where we have to raid to survive. But their gods are evil. Well, no. Their priests tell their people that they must raid to survive, and that only the strong survive, because that's the situation they're in. Because if they don't raid, they starve. So, yeah, looks evil from the outside, from the point of view of the people who looking at some orcs charging across the fields to steal their stuff. But let's have a bit more dimension and nuance to it than just book says evil.
And to briefly borrow a phrase from LARP, which probably came from somewhere in reality because art imitates life. I think it was to paraphrase it. It was a demon in the ranks of my enemies is an abomination and a sign of their heresy. A demon in my ranks is a sign of divine favor.
Yeah.
And you can look across, and there's a sketch as well of our god, our good people, us.
Yeah.
The horrible line, they're evil people, they're evil government, they're evil god, and then it just trace flip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it is literally just from the other side of the coin, the other side of the divide. It is the other way around. So no, hobgoblins classically were written as raiding, martial, bloodthirsty types. A couple of years ago in D&D at least, they were then written up as, they are heavily militarized. And that's because mostly players are encountering military encampments, not civil ones. Sure, they have a hierarchical structure. It's semi-feudal, semi-Japanese feudal to an extent, as opposed to Western feudal. But the players only encounter them in this scenario, so that's why they've always been that way. And that was before the current race to species language terminology change and the acknowledgements therein.
Yeah.
Becki, your take on subverting tropes and races, or otherwise.
My issue is that quite often there's this like pigeonholing of this thing's good, this thing's evil, and life is not like that. There's shades of grey throughout all of it, and I think it's very easy to go, I'm playing this lawful good character or this, chaotic neutral or whatever, and I think that kind of easily is where some of these stereotypes come in. So it's like, I'm playing a drow, so it must be in this way, or I'm playing an orc, so it must be this way. And it's like, no, because the human race as a race in the game is really diverse. So why are we not doing that with other races as well and other groups?
Not every human NPC you meet is going to be wearing the asshole hat.
Exactly.
Good person hat.
Yeah. And, so why are we not doing that across the board? And I'd much rather see that in that person who is maybe they are someone who raids, or they're a military kind of character, but that doesn't stop them from having other characteristics as well. They may be like a military character, but they're also a really good chef. And some of the really funny NPCs that my friend has DM'd has been like, we were all kind of sneaking through an enemy camp and we could hear all these enemies, these bad guys, and they're all sat around the campfire and just chatting like our characters would have. And that was just, it then kind of humanized them as characters and made us going, oh, maybe we don't want to ambush them, because then you feel bad because they're just sat around cooking their chicken, And it kind of, maybe it's just easier therefore to dehumanize them,
Oh yes,
Yeah, this is
that's propaganda,
very
and that
much
is
it.
exactly bang on. Yeah.
There's a thing I want to bring up. Let's face it, alignments are an old mechanic. They've been in there for a very, very long time, and fundamentally, in my opinion, a lot of the reason why they exist is to allow the players to not feel bad about what
Yeah.
they're doing.
Yeah.
You are almost always told to make good, lawful, or neutrally aligned characters, and if you're going to be chaotic, you want to be chaotic good, because or chaotic neutral. Never ever go evil, never ever play an evil character. And the simple reason, in my opinion, why they do that is because they don't want you to feel bad about what you are doing as adventurers. It gives you an out. These are bad guys, these are evil, we know that they are.
It's
Black
okay
hat, white
to
hat.
kill them.
Yeah.
I'm in one of the D&D 5th Ed modules, Storm King's Thunder. I was running that for a group of my players, and spoilers, early in the game, party come to a town that's been decimated by an assault with big ass rocks, and they find goblins all over the town, quite happily looting whatever they can.
Mhm.
And the party laid into the goblins. At one point, the party killed the lawful good, lawful neutral members of the party killed some goblins because, quote unquote, they fought back.
Oh, that is, yeah,
And
ladies and gentlemen, that is definitely.
and well, they were looting the town. What? Like you were when you were robbing the innkeeper's strongbox that was under his bed. Please use diagrams as necessary to explain the difference of moral position here.
Why you're better than these gobos? Yeah.
This is something that has happened in at least a couple of online streamed actual plays or various other things like that, which is characters sitting back and invariably jokingly, but realistically they should be thinking about it harder, saying the phrase, "Are we the bad guys?" And
Yeah.
far too often it's said out of hand like it's a joke.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in the last roundtable we recorded, I made mention of a bloodthirsty warlock that I was playing, and they're definitely evil because they kill for pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no illusions about that, but also they're sensible about it. They do noble adventuring things because no one minds if you slaughter bandits or marauding greenskins or what have
The
you.
Dexter of warlocks.
There we go. I was drawing that in my mind. Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, I don't need a get out for that character because they know precisely what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you've got neutral characters and good characters who will quite happily slaughter those self-same people without a thought.
Mm-hmm. So okay,
Also, go ahead.
I have a question then, because we introduced in this and we've talked about basically at the moment our problems with evil, but what do we do? And this was the big thing. What do we do to subvert it?
Yeah.
I mean, especially seeing as in a lot of cases, your player characters will see a orc and will go, "It's evil, job it." How do you make sure that that is not just passed by?
So in one of the Sunday campaigns I ran, and they're not the sort that are going to go instant murder her. So it was probably wasted on them because it would be more fun to do this to a bunch of players who were the warlocks are evil, just kill them.
Mm-hmm.
They were escorting a merchant caravan through an area, and they got the impression that this was orc territory because at the natural choke point there was, some spikes and some trophies set up, and a message in Orcish next to a big signal fire, a big sort of beacon fire.
Mm-hmm.
That basically boiled down to when they read the message is if you want to deal on if you want to deal honourably with us, light the fire. We'll come and have a talk. And they did, and a bunch of orcs came out on giant goat back. These were the goat herder orcs that I mentioned previously, so they're going to have some giant goats as their cavalry mounts because that's fun. And they get taken off to the orc village, where the orcs are around the campfire having a good old sing-song. But they're orcs. Why are they doing harmony singing? Why not? And then you get introduced to the orc chief, and she's described as having a very bloated belly, and one of the orcs in the crowd keeps looking worriedly at her. It's like, so I'm throwing these things out here going, look, these are regular people orcs. Do you want to kick off? Are you really such a bunch of evil players that you're going to draw steel on a pregnant orc chieftain who's being reasonable with you? I mean, I knew these group probably wouldn't, but it's one of those things. You show them in a more personal, well, a more human state, and then for chuckles, I had them attacked by a bunch of other adventurers who were all orcs are the same. We've been raided by orcs, so we're going to attack this village just to really drive the point home.
Yep, I like that.
I like it.
I
think it's interesting because. Oh,
go
sure.
Ahead. Go in. Yep, absolutely.
So I think it's interesting because I'm coming from the perspective of someone that started off in LARP and then came to tabletop a bit later. And I've started in LARP the past kind of 5 or 6 years, where I think it's more it's nowhere near as good as it could be, but it's much further along than when you hear about LARP from the 90s with some of the stereotypes and things like that. I would say that starting in LARP gave me a different insight because I came across orcs, drow, goblins that came from a variety of different styles. So we had orcs that were kind of the magic casters, but also orcs that were kind of like the proper fighty types, and then the ones that were the healer non-coms as well. So I came with the variety. So I think when I started playing tabletop, I expected it to be like that all the time, that there was much more nuance to it and it was much more shades of grey. And the people I started tabletop with were all LARPers. So that happened. Then I experienced, D&D, etc., with people who were non-LARPers, and I saw the other side of it, of how those tropes are still there in some aspects. And so for me, I'm like, yeah, let's drag people to role play, to create story, to have all the nuances, because that, for me, is how you subvert it, by humanizing things. Although humanizing maybe isn't the right word because we're talking about races, but you know what I mean, like
showing them as nuanced people rather than adding dimensionality.
Yeah,
adding
exactly.
Nuance. And one of the other world building things I did in that same campaign was I took a random coastal city in Forgotten Realms. I decided it would be run by a council of a lich, a red dragon, and a demon.
As you do.
And Monster Manual says evil, evil, evil. But looking beyond that, what are their agendas? What do they want? The lich likes having a trade in magical secrets and artifacts and things. It's a port city. So he wants magic for study. The red dragon, like, the city is prospering, therefore I have a big hoard. The city's prosperity is my hoard. And the demon's like, I like information. I like pulling the strings. All of these agendas are supported by having a city that's a nice place to live, where people are not having the crap pressed out of them, which is better than, Neverwinter, Baldur's Gate, or all the goody-goody human cities. I mean, okay, the lich has to occasionally eat someone's soul, but
hardship.
That's the city. One of the city's forms of capital punishment. After someone has had a fair trial, and we had a paladin in the party, and I made sure that there was an execution procession, so that she could ask, "What the hell's going on here?" Usually we fed to the lich. Whoa, that's bad. Well, he did kill several city guards, and he had been found guilty in a reasonably fair trial. Oh, I can't actually argue with that.
This checks out.
Yeah. And I think, basically what Becki came in with, and yourselves as well, you subvert the X race's evil trope by going the full depth, by going into not just the skin level, but down into the meat and bones of the race. Because as much as you encounter warlike orcs, well, where are they coming from? With
Who's feeding
I
them?
think it's Paizo. Yeah, where's it coming? Where's it all coming from? What's their motivation for being? How with Paizo, I think they were chased out of their version of the world, or their layer of the earth, or something similar. Or I might be thinking of another one.
It's a good fun story, that one.
Yeah.
Functionally, the dwarves were a subterranean race, and decided that they no longer wanted to be a subterranean race. They did something called the Race for the Sky, and fought their way up from the bottom of the Underdark all the way up through. Unfortunately, as part of that process, they caught up all the orc tribes that used to live on the layers slightly above them and pushed them all the way up as well. So the orcs lost their ancestral home in the dark lands, and were pushed up to the surface, which they didn't particularly want.
So a whole species, to step the word race effectively, a whole species going about their daily lives, living, dying, absolutely happy where they are, have their whole population turned upside down, their whole world quite literally erupted underneath them, assaulted by this whole other species with their singular intent from the orcs' perspective to destroy them in their own path to get to where they wanted to be. So they had to escape, and so they had to adopt martial and military and warlike approaches. So their whole culture goes from being potentially, to presume, variously peaceable, because you can have internal conflicts but be a peaceable species. Not looking at current politics. You can be peaceable but not like each other, and you can break down into small nations with that as well as cults or tribalism, and functionally get along, but with organised fighting, particularly tourneys and similar, and then have your whole perspective have to change because now you've got so little resource. So now you have to turn to raiding. You have to turn to being martial because it's now very difficult to survive without it. So you subvert these people are evil by realizing, from their perspective, they may well not be. And actually,
they've
when
had
you
an
look at behind
apocalyptic
their
event.
motivation, the apocalypse has happened for them, and they're living in their post-apocalyptic nightmare. Yeah. So subvert it by actually giving some depth to it, as opposed to bumping up to the border and presuming. Because that's where I'd be. Then again, I also run Dark Heresy, and there are also some very good fun bits and pieces in there of who is good and who is bad, because
no one is good in Dark Heresy.
No one's good. The Imperium itself is not good. Let's face it. They're more than happy to crush and rule by tyranny. So the humans are bad guys. Yeah, they live under it's a fascist regime in Warhammer. If you think the Imperium are good guys,
a moribund fascist state.
Yeah.
But I suspect that's possibly
a
segue into a whole different video.
It is. And I think that's a nice place to bring that one to a close, potentially.
Yeah, because I think we can all throw more subversion examples out there, but it does boil down to give it some dimensionality and nuance. No one's saying orcs or drow can't be assholes, but just understand why they're assholes.
Dr. Freeze breaks the law, therefore he is a bad guy. Their motivation is full-bodied.
Yeah, it's... Oh. Yeah, it's about in my opinion, the idea that there has to be a reason for the way that they are. Don't just run it like um, they're evil because that's what it says in the book. No, they're evil for
Mm.
what they're doing. Make what they're doing believable,
Mhm.
and don't make it so that that is your excuse for every single one of their kind. Everybody is different, and therefore, if you cannot come up with a reason for your orc or your undead or your kobold or whatever it is to be evil, then they're probably not.
Yeah, neutral is also evil from somebody's perspective because they're not helping them out.
Yeah, but I say world building and various other bits and pieces, you can always create what you want to create. Hey, I'm creating an entire nation in my world which is ruled by and governed by a bureaucracy of undead ghostly orcs. Hey.
Heck yeah.
I had to create an entire archipelago of samurai catfolk to support a couple of player characters' backstories. I, of course, insisted that their local delicacy was some sort of baked flatbread with a tomato and cheese topping, because if you're going to have samurai cats, they're damn well going to be samurai pizza cats.
Sorry.
Fair enough.
I love that
Fair
cartoon.
Becky, I'm looking forward to see the animation that you put to all of these things that we've been discussing.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Samurai pizza cats.
The good news is they exist. The cartoons are amazing, and people should watch them if they can find them.
Oh dear. But yes,
Samurai.
it's as with many things, it is simply a case of do not read the letters in the book and assume that gives you carte blanche
Yeah.
to make everything that way. In fact, to be brutally honest with you, in a lot of cases, the creatures that are in the books are presented as the bad guys. Don't look at the books and go, this shows you the race. It doesn't, it shows you the antagonists, and read it that way. There are always going to be some creatures in those books that are inherently never going to be anything but evil. It's very difficult to not make them that way because, let's face it, some of them are made that way, and I mean that literally. Some of the things in the books are made evil creatures, and that's just the way they are because they're made that way.
Yes.
Yeah. I swing to a very, very old movie with a very, very interestingly drawn rabbit and other female characters, where I believe the female characters, one of their comments is something along the lines of, "I'm not
Not
was it?
bad. I'm
Not
just
bad, I'm
bad.
drawn
I'm
that
just
way."
drawn that way." And that can be just the way it is, but it doesn't always have to be.
Indeed.
Okay, I think that's probably that one. I think we should probably say goodbye. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
We will try and get back to recording episodes for Abomination Vaults as soon as we can. But cheers for listening to the random conversations for these two short episodes that we've done.